The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Have you seen this new breakthroughs on Stan Dunham, Stanley Ann, Obama's mother? Have you read his life story?
I'm familiar with it. I'm not sure I've read the whole life story of the grandfather. You mean?
Yeah, the Big Stan, or were they called Gramps?
Yeah, right. I know the biography. I didn't know there was a life story about him. Is there?
His mother committed suicide in 1926, and his father abandoned him, and he had to go to El Dorado, Kansas. And he's really a psychologically, and you feel sorry for him, young guy.
Oh, by the way, the locals call it El Dorado, FYI.
Okay, El Dorado, Kansas, yeah. And
they insist on mispronouncing it, so don't get in their way.
I'm very sorry. But about him punching out the high school principal?
Yeah, right.
You knew all this stuff? I didn't know it.
No, yeah. No, he had a troubled adolescence, yeah.
And then he becomes like a lot of those young men in the Depression. He becomes a drifter, and he hops the rails, and then he marries Madeline or Toot on the night of her senior prom.
Yeah, yep.
And against the wishes of her father, and then they have the little girl that he names her his name, Stanley.
Right.
And
there's a little narcissism going on there.
Well, but it's weird. But they talk about this guy's life, but then they really roll into Stanley Ann, who is Barack Obama's mom, and she wants people to call her Ann.
Right.
And by this time, she has been, at 17, apparently, this is what Gilbert now believes, she was already posing naked for Frank Marshall Davis.
Uh-huh.
Do you believe that as well?
I have, I am of two minds about that, and I'm looking to be convinced, although the evidence is pretty compelling.
And then she meets, she claims she meets Barack Obama, who she met in this Russian language class, who never marries her, and he's married to he has a wife and 2 children back in Kenya.
Right.
So, and it doesn't have anything to anything, but is she having sex with both Frank Marshall Davis and Barack Sr. at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, and then the question is who's the actual father, which is, I know Joel Gilbert has explored that in some depth.
But then Obama, as a kid, Barry, is abandoned by his Kenyan father.
Right.
And then at this point, if they're married, Barack Sr. is a bigamist, but they're not married. And then he gets abandoned again by his father, and he only sees Senior, in 68, he sees him once, he's about 8 years old.
Yeah.
And then Senior dies drunk, right? He dies in a drunk driving wreck, but he's wrecked a bunch of cars.
Yeah.
And so Anne remarries this Indonesian guy, and at 65, she marries Lola Saturo, and they're in Indonesia. And there's people that are writing that I never knew, why does this matter? But she hires this transvestite in Indonesia. Have you seen any of this stuff?
Yeah, I've seen those pictures. Right, I know her story. Yeah,
Evie.
To be the nanny, right?
Yeah, the nanny, and
Barack was ahead of his time.
Yeah, well, now in 2012, did you know that Evie shows up again as she's a homosexual hustler at this time. She's a prostitute. She's broke.
I think someone straight publication actually did the New York Times or someone did an article on her. Yeah.
But they say that he's bullied as a kid, and then she has a baby girl and takes Barry back and dumps Barry on Toot and Gramps. And again, this pain of rejection. There's this interesting psychohistory, and at that point, Gramps almost immediately takes Barry to meet the black communist Frank Marshall Davis.
Yeah, he was also a pornographer with a taste for preteen girls, but otherwise.
Yeah, why would you take him? Right, why would you take him? And I didn't know he wrote under the name of Bob Greene. His
book, Sex Rebel Black.
Sex Rebel Black, that's right,
Right, pure pornography.
And he talks about a couple of three-way sex sessions with his wife and a young girl named Anne.
Yeah, right.
God, this stuff is so crazy.
He also talks about a 3-way with a couple from Seattle.
And that's her. That's Gramps and Toot.
Well, that's, I mean, presuming that that he's telling, his Sex Rebel Black is fictionalized. It's something of a novel, but it's clearly based on his own experiences.
But of all the names to pick, the young white girl whose name is Anne.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, it's
that's great. That's great
what is
stuff.
It? What a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive.
And we'll talk again tomorrow when you tie more of this up at the Magical Mystery Tour, right? I'm stumped at this stuff. Of course, I've been stumped at most stuff this morning from reading Robert Gates and read work. But I just you just come to your end every once in a while. I go, these people, these are absurdists. They're running the show.
Yeah, in fact, I would recommend the book. I'm just about halfway through now, and is the book by the whistleblower in the Fast and Furious case.
Oh, no, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that.
It just came out, and it shows you how these people work, and they are utterly, totally indifferent to the truth.
I'm sorry.
And that is something that you have to keep in mind whenever they open their mouths or say anything at all. I'm
gonna put you on hold. You'll talk to Casey, and we'll talk tomorrow. Thanks, Jack.
Okay, super. Thank you.
It's Jack Cashill, and also we'll talk to Joel Gilbert tomorrow on this. About nobody wants to listen to a Jack Cashill. They don't want to listen to him. You know why? Because I think they break the fantasy bubble, or it takes away from the message of Barack Obama. A guy like Jack Cashill, he'll never see Brian Williams in the evening news. It's just not going to happen. A guy like Robert Spencer is never going to be on Meet the Press and talk about, the failures of the Bush administration tied into the failures of the Obama administration. You're not going to hear that. You're not going to see that. Nobody's going to, he's not going to be able to talk. I remember when I met Robert Spencer, he was being attacked as a racist, and they would say these horrible things because he was really principally speaking out about Islam. It was like 13 years ago when I first met him with Jihad Watch. Gauze, the same thing. This guy, Alan Kerwin, coming up, I've never spoken to him before, but he says things you're no longer allowed to say. And, of course, the ability of the politically correct. And as I mentioned, if you go back, and, George Orwell had it all, and he had it all before anybody else had it. But that term, black-white, and you have to read the essays of Orwell and know Orwell's politics at the time. And and when he was talking about, he wrote 1984 and 1948. He just flipped the numbers. And that's really what he did. He was watching the Soviet Union. And in most cases, he was watching the Soviet Union. In Animal Farm, he's watching the Soviet Union. He's writing about the Soviet Union. The Snowball the Pig is Trotsky. And so you watch this stuff. Black-white is a great word. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the color of one's skin. But the best example I can give you recently in the press of Orwell's term black-white is George Zimmerman, the white Hispanic. Black-white's a word. It's not about skin color. It's not about, night and day. It's black-white. Words, Orwell tells us, mean what Big Brother says they mean. They don't mean what you think they mean. And now we're going to move into this now. Words mean what I say they mean. It's important. Jack Cashill. Now, Jack Cashill is one of those guys that seeks the truth about the true story of Barack Obama. And he has now broken through into another area, and he has dubbed it, and I think rightfully so, Barack Obama's Magical Mystery Kenyan Tour. And this stuff about Obama taking advance money from Simon & Schuster and never delivering a book and I'm just a flat-out con. And then, really, the king of swing is Joel Gilbert. I thought this is a great way to go out. And Gilbert's come through again, too, on the Dreams of My Real Father. And I said, how about coming on and taking calls? And Gilbert jumps on that with both feet. I love guys like that because they want to have conversation about their expertise. I'm Peter Boyles. Without further ado, we go back to this guy. He put one out of the ballpark yesterday. I'm a huge fan of his. Jack Cashill, who is a writer, more of a political investigator, and has just done some of the very best work on the life and times of Barack Obama. Please say good morning, Jack, and welcome back. Good morning, sir.
Hey, Peter, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I read again last night, I read the entire piece on the Magical Mystery Tour into Kenya. And, I was talked about it earlier in the 5 o'clock hour here on 710. You would think something that's this significant would at least maybe bring the New York Times or the LA Times or the Washington Post or someone's attention to the fact that this is yet another scam. If you and I were betting men, how would you bet the attention that's going to be given this?
Well,
the only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.